Today, we're counting down cases of influencers whose content ended in the most strange deaths, from a seafood mukbang that turned deadly after picking up the wrong shell, to a magnet fisherman whose discovery on a quiet canal killed him in a way almost no one would expect. It was August 12, 2017, along the coastline of Negros Oriental, Philippines. The tide had pulled back across a wide shelf of black volcanic rock, leaving shallow tide pools scattered between the stones. By late afternoon, a small tripod stood near the edge of the rocks while beachgoers moved quietly along the shoreline. Earlier that year, Cherry Dela Cruz, 26, had started a small YouTube channel built around beach foraging and inexpensive seafood mukbang videos. Online, she presented herself as someone comfortable along the shore, often speaking as if she had grown up around the ocean. In reality, Cherry was a city girl from Cebu City who had spent most of her life far from tide pools or fishing villages. Most of what she knew about shellfish came from watching local collectors along the shoreline and quickly researching species online before filming. That afternoon, she set up her phone beside a rocky inlet where tide pools formed between slick patches of algae-covered stone. Cherry placed several shells and small sea creatures onto a plastic tray, while her younger sister stood nearby, reading live-stream comments aloud. The plan was simple. Cherry would show viewers what she found in the tide pools, explain where each shell came from, and later cook anything edible. One shell in particular caught her attention. It was small and rounded, marked with pale brown triangular patterns that formed a faint net-like design across the shell. Light enough to sit comfortably in her palm, it looked like a harmless decorative shell someone might collect on a beach. Cherry turned it slowly between her fingers while explaining she had found it beneath a rock only minutes earlier. Then her hand jerked. A tiny puncture appeared near the base of her thumb. Cherry rubbed the spot and laughed, telling viewers it felt like a sharp sting. People nearby later said she mentioned it casually before continuing the video. At that moment, the sting seemed minor. For several minutes, nothing dramatic happened. Cherry continued arranging shells across the tray while talking to viewers. Then, her sister noticed something strange. Cherry began dropping items she had already picked up. A man collecting shells about 10 feet away later told investigators her movement suddenly looked slow and unsteady. Her speech began to blur. Words ran together, and sentences stopped halfway through. A woman walking along the rocks later said Cherry kept blinking repeatedly as if struggling to focus on the phone camera. Cherry tried to sit up straighter, but her shoulders sagged. Moments later, she tipped forward, striking the edge of the tray with her cheek before sliding sideways onto the rock. Her sister dropped the phone and shouted for help, while nearby beachgoers rushed across the tide pools. Several people carried Cherry toward the road, while someone ran to a nearby house to call emergency services. Witnesses said her breathing became shallow and irregular as they waited. Emergency responders arrived roughly 30 minutes later and attempted resuscitation, but Cherry had already stopped breathing. During the medical examination, investigators documented a small puncture wound on her thumb. Toxicology findings and witness statements helped reconstruct what had happened. The shell she had been holding was identified as a cone snail. Cone snail venom contains powerful neurotoxins capable of blocking the nerve signals that control muscles used for breathing. Even a small sting can cause rapid paralysis. The medical examiner ruled Cherry's death an accidental marine envenomation. Witnesses confirmed she had been holding the shell moments before the sting, and investigators found no signs of foul play. In the days after the incident, local collectors and residents along the shoreline began warning visitors not to handle unfamiliar shells in the tide pools. Cherry's body was later returned to Cebu City, where her family arranged her funeral after authorities ruled the death an accidental marine envenomation. A woman on a Philippine shoreline picked up a shell that looked harmless until the sting stopped her breathing. And months later, in the silent Mojave Desert, another traveler would settle into a parked van for the night, unaware the air around her was already turning deadly. It was January 18th, 2018. A white cargo van sat alone at a gravel turnout in the Mojave Desert, California. Overnight temperatures dropped below freezing, Inside the van, a small propane heater ran in a tightly sealed space. By morning, the vehicle looked quiet against the open desert. No one nearby realized the night inside had already turned fatal. Marina Cole, 29, had started a modest van life YouTube channel the year before. A freelance graphic designer from Phoenix, she had grown tired of moving between short contracts and small apartments. She sold most of her belongings, bought a used cargo van, and converted it into a simple mobile home. Her channel attracted about 5,000 subscribers. Marina filmed calm routines, cooking on a small stove, organizing storage bins, and hiking desert trails before parking beside empty landscapes. The videos showed quiet mornings and sunsets, a peaceful version of van life she carefully curated for viewers. During the second week of January, Marina drove across the Mojave looking for winter camping spots to film. Weather forecasts warned that nighttime temperatures would fall into the mid-20s. Travelers using heaters in enclosed vehicles were advised to keep the ventilation open. Marina carried a compact propane heater, commonly used by van campers. Most users left a window slightly cracked to allow fresh air inside. That night, however, the cold pushed her to seal the van more tightly. She closed the roof vent and packed towels into small gaps near the rear doors to keep warm air from escaping. By midnight, the interior had warmed enough for her to stop filming and settle onto the bed platform. The heater continued running near the floor. At some point during the early morning hours, the air inside the van began to change. The heater continued running in the sealed space as Marina rested inside, unaware that something dangerous was slowly building in the air around her. Inside the van, nothing dramatic would have seemed wrong. The heater ran quietly. Her phone and laptop remained on the fold-out desk beside the bed, and a mug sat near the stove from the last time she made tea. Marina likely became disoriented as the air inside the van slowly changed. Without realizing what was happening, she lay back down on the sleeping platform. She eventually lost consciousness while the heater continued running inside the sealed vehicle. When investigators later examined the van, they found no signs of struggle or attempts to leave the vehicle. The vehicle remained parked at the turnout for more than 2 weeks. Wind pushed sand against the tires and dust settled across the windshield. Hikers occasionally passed nearby, but nothing about the van appeared unusual among the scattered overnight campers. Concern began online instead of in the desert. Followers noticed Marina's social media accounts continued posting photos every few days. The updates described desert roads and quiet campsites, making it appear she was still traveling across the Southwest. One subscriber recognized a trailhead visible in the background of a scheduled post and contacted park authorities. Rangers drove to the turnout late that afternoon and knocked repeatedly on the van. When no one responded, they forced the rear doors open. Marina was found on the sleeping platform inside. A ranger radioed for emergency services at 4:12 p.m. Deputies and paramedics arrived about 20 minutes later, but Marina showed no signs of life. The heater had already shut off after the fuel cylinder emptied. The coroner later determined the cause of death as carbon monoxide poisoning. Blood tests showed extremely high levels of carboxyhemoglobin, meaning most oxygen-carrying cells in her body had been replaced by carbon monoxide. Investigators found no defect in the heater itself. The sealed van had allowed the gas to build slowly overnight. Authorities ruled the case an accidental death caused by improper ventilation. Investigators later discovered that Marina had scheduled weeks of posts before leaving Phoenix. While her van remained parked silently in the desert, her accounts continued uploading travel photos, creating the illusion that the journey was still ongoing. One traveler quietly sealed herself inside a desert van without realizing the air had already turned deadly. While hundreds of miles away in a quiet Los Angeles apartment, a young woman chasing online attention was about to discover that someone watching her posts had decided to step into the story. It was September 19, 2017, in a small apartment building near Glendale Boulevard in Los Angeles, California. The building was quiet that evening, and nothing unusual could be seen from the outside. Hours later, investigators would enter one of the units and begin reconstructing a sequence of events that had already ended in tragedy. Just months before that night, Bella Vane, 23, had been trying to grow a small beauty and fashion channel online. She filmed makeup tutorials, clothing hauls, and casual updates from her apartment bedroom. Her audience was small but loyal. Most videos drew only a few hundred views, but she treated each upload as progress toward becoming a full-time creator. Over time, Bella began experimenting with more dramatic content. She started posting videos suggesting someone might be watching her apartment. Viewers were encouraged to look for reflections in mirrors or shadows in hallways that might reveal a hidden stalker. The series quickly became her most discussed material, and her channel passed 3,000 subscribers during that period. On the evening of September 19th, Bella prepared another video continuing the storyline. She intended to claim someone had entered her apartment earlier that day. The plan was to stage a tense scene in the bathroom while describing strange noises she believed were coming from the building. Earlier that afternoon, maintenance workers had opened a ceiling access panel in the hallway to inspect plumbing lines. Bella mentioned the activity online and suggested someone could move through the crawl space above the apartments, which fit the narrative she had been building. Inside the apartment, she arranged the setting for the video. The bathroom lights were dim, and a small ring light illuminated the room. The bathtub had been filled nearly to the overflow drain. At some point later that night, something interrupted the routine she had planned. Bella stopped responding to messages from friends and followers who expected updates. Hours passed without any activity from her accounts. When repeated attempts to contact her failed, someone requested a welfare check at the apartment. Officers arrived at the building and knocked several times before forcing entry when no one answered. Bella was found on the bathroom floor beside the bathtub. Paramedics attempted resuscitation inside the apartment, but she showed no pulse and was not breathing. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death through autopsy findings. Bruising around the neck and small hemorrhages in the eyes indicated manual strangulation. The pressure had restricted blood flow to the brain long enough to cause fatal oxygen deprivation. With the cause of death confirmed, investigators began examining Bella's recent online activity and the storyline she had been building around a supposed stalker. Messages recovered from her accounts revealed frequent contact with one follower who had become unusually involved in the narrative. Detectives also learned that small incidents Bella had mentioned online, objects moved in the hallway and noises above the apartment, may not have been imagined. Further investigation showed that the same individual had entered the building's crawl space after seeing Bella mention the hallway access panel in her posts, moving items in shared areas to reinforce the stalking story she was telling. Security footage later showed the man leaving the property that night. He was eventually identified and located by investigators. During questioning, he admitted visiting the apartment after following Bella's posts about the crawl space and the supposed intruder. According to investigators, he believed he was helping create a more convincing scene for her content. Authorities concluded that the encounter turned into a struggle inside the bathroom, where Bella was fatally strangled. The case was officially ruled a homicide. Investigators concluded that the follower had entered the apartment after becoming involved in the stalking storyline Bella had been posting online. The man was later arrested and charged with murder after authorities determined the encounter escalated into a struggle inside the bathroom where Bella Vane was fatally strangled. Before we move into the next case, if you're interested in these breakdowns of strange real-life tragedies involving influencers and online creators, consider subscribing for more stories where ordinary moments suddenly take a turn no one sees coming. Now let's continue with the next case. It was April 22, 2018. Along a narrow stretch of canal in Dearborn, Michigan, the water moved slowly beneath a concrete pedestrian bridge. A young man prepared equipment beside the riverbank while cyclists passed overhead as the quiet canal moved steadily beneath the concrete span. Earlier that morning, Derek Rojas, 27, arrived carrying a tripod, gloves, rope, and several heavy neodymium magnets used for magnet fishing. What began as a hobby had gradually turned into a small side hustle. The scrap metal he pulled from rivers, old tools, pipes, bicycle frames, could be taken to a recycling yard for a few dollars. Derek worked weekdays detailing cars at a repair shop, but the pay rarely covered everything. On weekends, he walked canals and riverbanks searching for metal worth recovering. Most finds were worthless scrap, but occasionally a heavier piece meant a little extra gas money. His small YouTube channel, followed by about 5,000 subscribers, documented the searches. Viewers watched for the chance that something unusual might surface. That afternoon, he chose a deeper section of canal beside the pedestrian bridge where decades of discarded metal had settled along the bottom. Derek set the tripod facing the canal before lowering the magnet into the water. Nearby warning signs cautioned about hazardous debris in the canal, but he continued anyway. Pedestrians crossed the bridge above him, and a man walking a dog paused nearby as Derek began dragging the magnet slowly along the canal floor before pulling it back up. The first few pulls brought up bolts and small pieces of scrap metal. Each time he dropped the magnet again, hoping for something heavier. On the sixth pull, the rope suddenly went tight. Derek leaned back and planted his boots against the concrete edge. Whatever was attached below felt heavier than the earlier finds. He hauled steadily until a tangled mass broke the surface. Rust-coated wire and twisted metal fragments clung tightly to the magnet. He pulled the bundle onto the edge of the concrete bank and crouched beside it, trying to separate the pieces from the magnet's powerful pull. The metal scraps were tightly knotted together. Each attempt to free them required him to pull the tangled bundle against the magnet's surface. The man with the dog later told investigators Derek seemed focused on untangling the debris so he could show it to the camera. While gripping the wire bundle with both hands, Derek leaned closer to see where the pieces were caught. The tension in the twisted scrap suddenly released. The metal shifted sharply in his hands, and Derek recoiled with a shout. He stumbled backward several steps before collapsing onto the concrete path beside the canal. The debris bundle fell beside him. The nearby pedestrian ran toward him, while two cyclists stopped on the bridge and shouted down. One of them called emergency services, while others kept people back. Blood was visible around Derek's face as he lay on the ground, barely moving. Witnesses said his breathing quickly became shallow and irregular. Paramedics arrived several minutes after the emergency call. They assessed the injury and attempted life-saving measures, but Derek showed no meaningful neurological response. He was pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, responders examined the debris Derek had pulled from the canal. Inside the tangled scrap, they found a long, rusted construction nail lodged through loops of twisted wire. Investigators determined that when the debris shifted under tension, the rigid nail rotated outward from the tangle just as Derek leaned over the bundle. The point entered through his eye socket and penetrated the brain. The medical examiner confirmed the cause of death as traumatic brain injury resulting from penetration through the orbital cavity. Within magnet fishing communities, the incident later circulated as a cautionary example. Authorities reminded hobby magnet fishers to treat recovered metal as hazardous and avoid leaning over tangled debris while separating it from powerful magnets. One man searching a canal for scrap metal learned too late how dangerous hidden debris can be. While miles away in a steaming Yellowstone basin, another traveler would step just inches beyond a boardwalk rail and discover what was moving beneath the ground. It was September 14, 2017, inside a geothermal basin in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. The boardwalk wound through a field of steaming ground and bright mineral pools. Visitors paused along the railings to photograph the colored water while thin clouds of steam drifted across the walkway. That afternoon, Logan Pierce, 28, arrived carrying a tripod, a camera, and a small action camera mounted on a telescoping pole. He had started a modest outdoor channel with about 4,000 subscribers only a few months earlier, shortly after ending a 6-year relationship. The two had built their lives around seasonal work across the western states, rafting in summer, ski lifts in winter, campground jobs in between. When the relationship ended, Logan found himself traveling alone. Filming trips through national parks became a way to stay occupied during long drives and quiet nights at campsites. On September 14th, he stopped along a boardwalk beside a steaming blue pool surrounded by pale mineral crust inside the geothermal basin. Visitors moved along the wooden walkway while thin clouds of steam drifted across the ground. Rangers regularly warned that the crust surrounding geothermal pools could collapse without warning. Beneath the pale mineral surface, boiling water often flowed through hidden channels. Logan positioned the tripod on the boardwalk and began filming a segment explaining how geothermal features worked and why visitors were required to remain on the walkway. To capture a closer view of the mineral surface, he extended the action camera on the telescoping pole over the railing. The pale crust appeared dry and solid from above. Small bubbles occasionally disturbed the bright blue water several feet away. Steam drifted across the basin as Logan leaned forward to adjust the camera angle. While steadying himself, his boot briefly pressed against the mineral surface just outside the railing. Visitors sometimes made similar balancing movements without realizing the crust could be fragile only inches beyond the walkway. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the surface beneath his foot cracked open. The crust collapsed in a narrow opening, and Logan's leg dropped straight through into a channel of scalding runoff water flowing beneath the mineral layer. Steam burst upward as he tried pulling himself backward. The crust around the opening began breaking apart while he struggled. Boiling water soaked through his pant leg within seconds. Witnesses later said he managed to twist his body and fall backward onto the boardwalk, pulling his leg free while steam continued venting from the hole beside the railing. Two nearby visitors rushed forward and dragged him farther away from the edge while others called park rangers. Logan remained conscious but was shaking and unable to stand. The lower portion of his pant leg had burned away where the water soaked through. Skin along his lower leg had already begun blistering from the extreme heat. Rangers arrived roughly 8 minutes after the emergency call. They secured the area and began first aid while staff prepared a helicopter landing zone nearby. About 30 minutes later, a rescue helicopter transported Logan to a regional hospital. Doctors treated Logan for extensive thermal injuries across much of his lower body. Water in geothermal runoff channels can exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to destroy tissue within seconds. Despite emergency treatment, his condition worsened from severe fluid loss and shock. He died later that evening. The medical examiner documented third-degree burns across more than half of his lower body. Investigators determined the collapse occurred where his boot had briefly pressed against the thin mineral crust just inches beyond the boardwalk rail. Beneath that fragile layer, a channel of near-boiling water had been flowing unseen. The death was ruled an accidental geothermal burn caused by crust failure outside the designated walkway. During the investigation, park authorities reviewed Logan's phone and travel notes. Among the recent drafts was a short message written earlier that day to his former partner, describing how strange Yellowstone's geothermal basins felt, and remarking that if something ever happened to him while traveling, it would probably be in a place like that. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.